Okay, hello. This is the second part of the earth and the shape that it takes, of the shape of the earth. Let's just talk about it from the Bible, the biblical point of view. These are just studies that I did as I prayed and looked for stuff in the Bible and what the Lord showed me. So I reiterate, as a Christian, when thinking about the shape of the earth, the first place, your study should begin with the Word of God. Because the earth, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth belongs to God. So if anyone should know what shape the earth is, it is God who should know. And if there's anywhere we should go to get the answer, it should be from the Bible. So let's talk about Noah's flood and something called the abyss. When the time came for Noah to get into the ark, we are told that the fountains of the great deep were broken up. Water came up from the deep in addition to rain coming down. I don't know that you'd noticed that there was rain coming down and there was water coming from somewhere called the deep. This deep is also referred to as the abyss. Let's go to Genesis 7 verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. So when the earth was flooded so as to destroy all life on it, the fountains were closed and the rain was stopped. That's now chapter 8. But now chapter 7 verse 11, we can just look up the reference. 7 verse 11. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 7th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep. So this word deep, when you look at the reference, what that word actually means in this word, an abyss, as a surging mass of water, especially the deep, the main sea or the subterranean water supply, deep, the depth. Okay, so we are told that the fountains of the great deep were broken up. So when you think about the oceans, if the oceans have always been how they've been even up to today, when you're told that the fountains were broken so that water could come up, and flood the earth, that tells you that the oceans, the ocean bottom actually is connected to something. I guess that's why they're calling it the subterranean water. So we're introduced into this abyss, the abyss. In the New Testament, the same word refers to what is called the bottomless pit. But let's continue. It's Genesis 7:11, the fountains of the great deep were broken up. In Genesis 8 verse 2, after all life had died other than those guys who were in the ark, then the fountains were closed. So it says, the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. So the fountains of the abyss were stopped. In chapter 7, they were broken up so that water could come up. In chapter 8, they were stopped so that water could stop coming up. So clearly, the waters of the oceans have a source somewhere. And that source can be opened and it can be closed. Something that you learn actually, that I learned from this, is that there's a lot about the earth that we don't understand. That we probably cannot understand. But it is written for us in the scriptures, probably to just know that God is bigger than what we think. He's greater than what we think. At least that's what I get from this, that there are actually fountains which can be opened and they can be shut. So the oceans as they are do not flood the earth. At the time of the flood, their fountains were opened, increasing their water greatly to the point of flooding the earth. We thus know from the word of God that the oceans have fountains that can be broken up. The deep spoken of in Genesis 8:2 directly translates as abyss, which literally is a bottomless pit. This tells us that the water coming up is coming from a very deep place, and this water is actually coming from somewhere else, not what we know. Yeah? So anyway, Job 38 verse 8. Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When Job is being questioned by the Lord, he is asked, who shut the doors of the sea when it broke forth? We would have been tempted to call this figurative language if we didn't know the story of the flood. Yeah? That the sea broke forth as though it had issued from a womb. From the womb. When you think of the fountains of the deep that we just read about, then you understand that really during creation, the sea actually broke forth from those fountains. And at some point they were stopped, I guess, when the Lord saw that they were sufficient. Yeah, the water was sufficient. So we know, as you go reading further and further, you stop looking at things as being figurative. You realize that actually this is literal language. We know that the sea has fountains whose doors were shut during creation and God was satisfied with the level of the sea. These same doors were broken during the flood and shut when the purpose had been achieved. Let's go to Revelation 20 verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. The angel came down from heaven. Where did he come to when he came from heaven? He came down to the earth. He had having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up. So remember, we were talking about the abyss. The same word actually that translates bottomless pit is still the same one for abyss. The deep. So clearly, this in my thinking, I would think it's like a portal to somewhere, or a hole that really goes into many other things, not just the water. Because we're told here that the devil was bound and he was thrown there, and he's going to stay there for 1,000 years, and then he's going to come out again. He's going to be released for a short season. So he was cast into the bottomless pit and it was shut. And please note that the angel came with a key. So he opened the door, threw the devil in, shut the door, locked it with the key, left the devil there. So actually, does that tell you, when you have a bottomless pit, let's just consider this word, a bottomless pit. That means that pit, that hole doesn't end. It's like falling into a hole forever. You just keep falling and falling and falling. How big is the space that, or the mass that contains that hole? How far do you think it goes if something is called the bottomless pit? It must be really deep. Now, if you consider a globe earth, think about a globe earth with a bottomless pit. We would have to have a hole running through the globe, starting from end to end, yeah? But still, it wouldn't qualify as a bottomless pit, because then that would mean you'd fall into space, you'd be suspended somewhere. But it's being called the bottomless pit. And when we talk about the deep, it goes somewhere into a subterranean ocean. So is that really compatible with a globe, with a ball spinning in space? Do you actually see a bottomless pit there? And this is not something spiritual, okay? I mean, we can't spiritualize this and say there's a spiritual hole somewhere where the devil was cast, yeah? This is literal language. That's why when the earth was flooded, it wasn't flooded figuratively, it was actually flooded for real. Yeah? So this is another mention of the abyss or the bottomless pit, where an angel comes down to earth and opens it and casts the devil in and then shuts him. Can a spinning globe have a bottomless pit, even if it ran from the supposed North Pole to the South Pole? Wouldn't it be pointless to cast the devil into it, as you'd only need to get out of the other end? So it runs from the earth into whatever the earth is anchored into, beneath it. The thing that Job was being asked, where did I fasten the foundations of the earth? That is where this pit runs into, whatever that is. And that is incompatible with a globe. So there's a very interesting discussion coming up after this. This would be probably the last section, but it talks about some really crazy things, and still in the Bible. So let's see you there.